Yassel, wie kommt das als fragen, welche Schale ist? How can you come to ask such like heretical questions? So he answered them, look, you put me in front of a sefer. He was an Ilui. He says, you put me in front of a sefer from I'm 5 years old to learn and question this book, this page of Gemara from Daf Bezim and Aleph here, the right, and you want me in this box, in this frame, to ask it as much as question, and you're training my mind to always inquire, and then you say, no, outside of these margins, you can't ask anymore.
That was Toshev Enosh, a niggin attributed to the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Tanya, from the record Nechayach Volume 4. This is Extra Sauce. My name is Chaim Cohn, and this is episode 6. It's been a few weeks since our last episode. I had a lot of work to do and was out of town and just trying to be responsible and pay some bills so I can do things like this. I'm going to post an update on where we're headed with the podcast shortly, but for now, suffice it to say that I don't have any intention of slowing down. Just bought a nice amount of audio equipment and got a studio space that we'll be using, but it's going to take a few weeks to get set up. This episode is another more Lubavitch theme, although I think the ideas are relevant anywhere. But moving forward, I don't think majority of the episodes will be, say, in any way Lubavitch specific. This episode is part 1 of a Farbrengen that I hosted in my garage about 6 weeks ago with 3 good friends of mine, Rabbi Shmuly Metzger, Chezzi Denebeim, and Baruch Thaler. These are giants, each of them in their own right, and I had planned and still do plan to sit down with them each individually to hear some of their stories and reflection. But as fate had it, they happened to all be in town one Monday night, and I asked them to all come over. We had a barbecue, and then we had a 6-hour Farbrengen in the garage. And my friend Hanan Rose came over and mic'd the place up, and it sounds pretty good. There was some occasional outside noise, but it sounds good. I originally wanted to post this about 2 weeks ago, before Gimel Tammuz, but as you can imagine, 6 hours worth of audio, it was quite an editing job, and couldn't manage to put it all together. And then I realized probably not a good idea to try to put it all out in one. So I'm going to do them in parts. This is part 1. There'll definitely be a part 2. The question is if it's going to be 3. I'm not sure yet. In this part 1, I asked each of my 3 guests to share some memories or reflections on growing up in Lubavitch, and for Shmuly and Baruch, specifically Crown Heights. They don't need any introduction, certainly if you are familiar with the who's who in present-day Lubavitch life. But my friend Rabbi Shmuly Metzger is a shliach. He has a Chabad house in Sutton Place, That's Midtown East in Manhattan. And he's a good friend and someone I admire greatly. And as a human being, as a Lubavitcher, as a rabbi. And I definitely plan to sit down with him privately for an episode to hear more about his life and his story. My friend Chezzi Denebeim is a really close friend, and he currently resides in Palm Springs, where he grew up. He's the founder of the shul in Crown Heights, Chavah Yisrael, which you may have heard of. And my friend Baruch Thaler is a legend in these parts. He's a man with a lot of stories and a lot of wisdom and a lot of stories to tell. So, I hope you enjoy this. In the coming parts, you'll hear more about, a real good variety of perspectives on the Rebbe, on to what degree the Rebbe desired his Chassidim to individuate and charter their own path, while staying true to the intention and blueprint, and how one does that. And some of the conversation got heated, but all in all, it was extremely meaningful to hear different perspectives. And we talk about some of the dysfunction that is inherent to, religious life in general, and specifically Chabad in the tall order that we grew up with from a very young age, and the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful. So that's to come. But this episode is lighter in nature, and it's some stories and memories. And so, it was Gimel Tammuz 2 weeks ago, and I was, a week and a half ago. Tonight's Yud Beis Tammuz. I'm in the studio. It's Monday night of Yud Gimel Tammuz, going into Yud Gimel. And I guess it's relevant in how, perhaps not in this part 1, but in part 2, we talk about, Lubavitch is not Lubavitch of Russia. We're not fighting communism. We're not fighting a czar. We're living in 2019, and to what degree are we appreciating that difference? And we discuss the Rebbe's first mimer of Basi Lagani, and compare and contrast it with some of the themes in what's known as the Rebbe's last mimer of Ata Tzava, and have we progressed in distinguishing the difference between how we live as Jews when we are being oppressed versus living in freedom, and there's a lot there, but you'll hear that in part 2. But for now, what I did want to say was, I was talking to a friend on Gimel Tammuz, and we were both kind of sharing how we're just, kind of confused, and every year on Gimel Tammuz kind of confused, be it 25 years or 15 or 10, in that, I can't say that I feel a whole lot like the people around me were feeling. I can't match that level of intensity, neither do I want to, but I do know that it means something to me. And oftentimes I find myself living relative to and comparing myself, and that kind of robs me from the opportunity to actually ask, okay, well, maybe it doesn't mean that for me, but what does it mean? And as we talk about in this episode, it's kind of difficult and I don't think, like, effective to discuss these issues entirely, like, from a theoretical place. For me, anyway, they have a lot of deep emotional and psychological roots. They were implanted very early on, and to talk about them in a removed way and not be honest about the personal nature that they have wouldn't be fair. So that's some of what we talk about, and here is Lubavitch in 2019, Part 1, Coming Home. And I'll jump back in at the end to share some closing remarks, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Perhaps we can start by just we're here in Crown Heights. I'm going to ask each one of you, and then I'll share my own. Give me a memory that says Crown Heights to you, and more particularly, a memory that says Crown Heights that keeps you coming back. Shmuly, you live in Manhattan now. You grew up here. And Baruch, you grew up here, but you come back at least once a year, well, sometimes more. Chezzi, you're back here all the time. You didn't grow up here, but to give me a memory, doesn't have to be an early one, just whatever. And or a sentiment, doesn't have to necessarily be a memory or a story, but a sentiment that says Crown Heights to you. Doesn't even have to be positive. Just something to just bring this here.
It's who you are, so you can never escape who you are, and hopefully you don't try to escape who you are either. I would say the memories that they are for me, they are memories, because a sentiment wouldn't be strong enough to bring me back. It has to be an actual smell, a taste, something. And that was my entire childhood, because my parents are very Chassidish people, and my grandparents and all of that. So I was raised, al Sid HaBasar, and especially though to come back over here, it wasn't really Crown Heights. It was by the oil. My first memories of Lubavitch outside of Palm Springs, which is where I'm from, because Palm Springs is whatever, you're on Shlichus, it's a different thing. It's a completely different animal. But my first memories or tastes of Lubavitch were actually at the oil when I was very little, right after Gimel Tammuz, maybe a year or two. And then I would go over there. I think the first time was by my cousin's Ofruf, Yossi Darren's Ofruf. And the memory of that is something that's so strong and so powerful and so beautiful. I try not to be nostalgic today because it's inefficient. I'm trying to do everything very efficiently, but I'm not efficient, so I am nostalgic. But it's not only nostalgia. It's I feel like everything that I am today is as a result of this. All of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And there was only a brief period in my life where I was upset with it. But I was going through a lot of transitions in my personal life and in my spiritual life, and I was in a deep, deep state of confusion, not doubt. It's a big chilek. The suffix is not doubt. I think doubt is a good thing. We always said that to have doubts is a it's like suffix is amalek, But it's not, I don't think that's the case. But confusion is like you have there's no joy in anything. It's depression. That's what it is. And for that brief period, I did have a lot of resentment. I don't know if it was to anybody in particular, although I did aim it at certain people in particular. And then I came through it because ultimately these things are self-evident. These things are for me, anyways. I have these memories. The truth is, and they even come before then. But they're very, very. I don't know. They're like the damatamtsis. They're like the blood and guts of everything good in the world. and everything in the world. They're everything. To me, it's everything. Everything, wherever I go in the world, it's always, wherever I go geographically and also wherever I go in my mind, these things are at the core of everything. They lie at the heart of everything that I know. And so I don't keep coming back. I'm always there.
Did you carry this focus on Crown Heights or the Rebbe or the Ohel, even growing up in California, the son of a shliach out there in total open leisure land? How much did you feel that you were tethered to Beis Chayenu, to 770, to the Rebbe's, the source?
Growing up, I feel like I was a child well into my 20s in terms of cognitive. I wasn't too. I'm a very, very slow. I was very late in terms of. I'll tell you what it is. When I was growing up in Palm Springs, I didn't think of anything b'chlal. I didn't think of things. I went to Detroit. That was my first foray into the world of,
dysfunction?
Yeah.
I thought you were looking for that word.
Yeah, but you know
the
what?
Klamke.
The Klamke. That's really, we were educated by communists, essentially. They were old school Russian Chassidish Yidden, and they were good, bad, and ugly. They were everything. It was life. And I don't resent any of it. In fact, for me, even though a lot of it was horrible, a lot of it was incredible, and I think even the horrible parts they're so full of life. Maybe I don't know if that's a dark thing. Maybe somebody would say, "Oh, that's messed up." You're really, wow. You look at these things, but to me, I don't feel enslaved to them. I honestly don't feel. There's things in my life that I do feel enslaved to, but mostly they're to my own. There are systems that I've created in my own mind that I'm enslaved to. These things that they were, yeah. I don't know if that answered your question or completely circumvented it.
That's perfect. All right, Rabbi Baruch.
I don't know if I'm ready to talk about myself personally, and I don't want to be vague either. But so I'll find the balance in a way that is not too specific, but will be as articulate and clear as possible. So, just like people's childhood, as we grow up into adulthood, things that seemed large and big when we were small, we see when we're bigger that they weren't that large. And just thinking of how large Kingston Avenue seemed to a 5-year-old. The memories attached to 11213 and 225 goes to the most formidable years. So there's the very just the history of it. And I'm a little bit older than you guys, so I don't want to reveal too much, but I do remember the tough times of the 70s, and then the most majestic years of the Rebbe was probably in the 80s into the 90s, and being in Ola Torah in those years when it was so my early sense with Crown Heights was just a sense of almost idyllic innocence and not even naivete, just a certain purity. Everything seemed holy. Those hexagonal blocks of the service lane of Eastern Parkway that we would dig out during recess, those were holy. Even the piles of garbage in front of Roskin's, that was holy. And then we grow up, and then things become. Then, in my case, I left for years, and as you mentioned, I come back. And since I personally don't live as much of the Chassidish life as I used to, and so on a personal sense, there's more of a asymmetry because it less fits me, my lifestyle here in Crown Heights. At the same time, there's a part of me that always is and will be part of Crown Heights. I not only have family here and roots that go back even to my grandparents, but there's something about the I wouldn't say like what they speak about in the Chassidus, there is shimu, that there's an impression left, and that part that is so ingrained that will never leave. And honestly, in a way, I have put myself a bit in exile, leaving. And sometimes it's only when you're at a distance that you get to sense the beautiful things or the parts or see things clearer. And I must say, I have ironically become more healthfully integrated into being in Crown Heights by exploring other places and then coming back intermittently. And the fact is, Crown Heights itself has evolved significantly and is more acclimated in a way. I mean, the original Hasidic Crown Heights is still there. It's the undercurrents, and I'm still amazed when I do go into some store on Kingston and hear a whole family speaking only in like Hasidic Yiddish.
So much real they fighting Yiddish.
They fight in Yiddish, right? As Ken Shelton, yeah, Yiddish, and it's beautiful, So there is, like Chezzi mentioned, some nostalgia. I mean, we're right here. Can we reveal where we are? We're here at Crown and Schenectady, which is I grew up for several years right here, and also around the corner, right here on the corner, was the famed Hasidic artist Zalman Kleiman, which I remember vividly painting upstairs. And he captured a lot of that aura of Crown Heights, specifically in this area. And they were just like...
Can I ask you, just a curiosity, do you remember there was a Majlis Stiebel around here?
There was a Majlis, I mean on Carroll?
Yeah, but like in Utica, between Rochester and Utica? Right?
Rochester, I heard of it, but I was never actually there.
Yeah, and then do you remember a family... they produced a lot of the Jewish records then, the Majitzer records and other things that lived... Stambler?
Stambler, I heard of the name, and
Benedict Stambler.
Yeah.
I think it was on this blog.
And in general, I mean, there was still that was the ending phase of the multi-religious, cultural, we could maybe want to call it, from Crown Heights. There was still a Litvische Kollel and a Gudas Yisrael Shul, and Bubba, I don't think was here. There was a Belzer Stiebel right across the street from Olitera on Eastern Parkway, and they were interesting because they did not accept the new Belzer Rebbe, the current one. They still only followed the Reb Aaron, who passed away in the 50s. And in fact, in my class of Olitera, there was a Belzer kid, and you're right. So there was a certain there was some, and it's, I mean, in my specific case is quite different also because I'm the child of Baal Teshuvos, and there was a whole pre-Crown Heights experiences and such, and I was basically the only Baal Teshuva kid in my Olitera class. So maybe one other kid at some point, a little bit, not semi. But basically, there were very few of the children of Baal Teshuvos, and so there was that. There's another layer there, and that is also something that would be interesting to explore, because they're unique issues, not only experiences, but certain unique situations or let's call it issues that children of Baal Teshuvos, I don't want to say about children of survivors from World War II, so to speak, but there is a subcategory within our community, and that have their own unique things. I would love to make a Farbrengen just with the kids of the Baal Teshuvos. And
hold on. Could I ask you? Did that like contribute a lot to your like moving out? Did you feel like you were? I don't know if it's too early to ask. Did you feel like you were like an outsider?
I knew I was, but I didn't have like major issues about it. I just knew this is who I am. You know what I mean? Because I had my own story, so to speak, and B'Teva, there were. I was able to entertain myself. There was certainly a feeling that vis-a-vis where I am now, I am different. But the truth is that I would have felt different wherever I was anyways. That's just my feeling, period.
Wait, but hold on. But if you... first of all, can I just ask you, at what you said at a certain point you grew up, and then everything was this kind of utopia, was like, which I think we all experience, hopefully.
Yeah.
And then but then you grow up. Was that was before Gimel Tammuz, right?
Yeah.
You were already.
Well, again, like being, I think a good part, precisely not having long-term roots in Lubavitch, or even in a really like unadulterated, unbroken chain of like old school shtetl Yiddishkeit. My grandparents. I mean, they were into the Yiddishkeit, but they were already Americanized, and they weren't living the fully Orthodox, though. Their parents were somewhat like it was on low volume, though not off, but there was no direct links here, so it was maybe easier to explore and find other ways. Another factor is that the fact that knowing that the children of Baal Teshuvos, knowing that our parents themselves rebelled from their parents and changed their lives, so there's an irony, those that do change, of the children of Baal Teshuvos, that whatever paths they take, that they're also following in their parents' footsteps on some level. So there's the as of why I did not remain in the fold, so to speak. A lot of it just had to, it's hard to know what is nature, what is nurture, so to speak. What is the reasons of, from psychologically or historically, our personal history, and what is more, let's say, philosophical, right? So it so happened that as my mind evolved and I just started thinking ways that you were mentioning before about suffix, doubt not being a treifa word. maybe, just the exploration of the mind. Sometimes we have to ask to answer, so to speak. Some not always do the answers come right away and easily. Sometimes it can take years or decades, right? And
I think there's the shaila. I think that I'm trying to understand is that you're right, but usually I think it starts with there's an emotional decision, or not a decision, but something happens emotionally, and then we start. Then this facus and all the other things come in. In other words, if we weren't touched emotionally,
right,
then we wouldn't have ever necessarily embarked on that ideological journey.
Right.
That was the shaila. If you could identify that emotional departure.
Right. If there, okay. So it's somewhat two parts. So you're asking whether there was like an external experience or something internal, and it was a combination of both. I would say there were factors in both. I would say I had things like just having my mind thinking in ways where until I just seeing infinite regress of uncertainty. Or relativity rather than absolute truth or something like that. So maybe sometimes we have to, let the earth jiggle or dive into the sea until we find the solid ground, and maybe it's interesting that. Because on the other hand, there is all the training not to allow the mind to go to places like to ask. Remember during the Sfarim case, when the Sfarim returned in 1987-88, Beis Kislev, so that Shabbos thereafter, the Rebbe mentioned that they should publish for that Shabbos a book of philosophy by Meir Ibn Gabbai, called Derech Emunah, which is a philosophical work to prove God's existence and that God, leads the world. And question number one over there is, how does God, or how is it possible for God to conduct and operate the world? Yada yada. So the Rebbe's point was at that Shabbos when he spoke, explaining the Sefer, the book, he pointed out the question is not if God exists to operate the world, but God who exists, how is it possible for the other? Like, there are certain areas we don't even go. I have a dear friend who journeyed with me away from our respective Hasidic backgrounds. He's from Satmar. And so he started, when he was learning in Satmar, he started asking very existential questions about the existence of God, which the Gadish Rabbanim didn't know how to answer. So they asked him, let's call him Yassel. Yeah. Say, Yassel, wie kommt es? How can you come to ask such heretical questions? So he answered them. Look, you put me in front of a sefer. He was an Ilui. He says, you put me in front of a sefer I'm 5 years old to learn and question this book, this page of Gemara from Daf Beis Amud Aleph here, the right, and you want me in this box, in this frame, to ask it as much as quite, and you're training my mind to always inquire, and then you say, no, outside of these margins, you can't ask anymore. You're locking me in this box. I can only ask my questions in this box.
It's like saying you could wander wherever you want in this little field.
All right. So some of us, for whatever reason, I'm not going to say whether we could debate if it was Bechira Chavshis or if it's Hashkacha Pratis. It depends. You want to look at it according to the Rambam or according to the Ishbitz. But Zakol b'dei Shemayim, Chutz mir Shemayim, or Afil Yir Shemayim.
Chutz mitzinim Pachim.
Pachim. Yes. The same pachim ktanim.
No, chutz mit zinim pachim. Like the
cold, the illness, right. Yeah. These things. So so the vart is yelchem achayil chayil. As long as we're emotional, as long as we're not what's the word? Not complacent.
On the subject of back to Crown Heights, this thing always, I heard this a long time ago. Chezzi could correct me because I believe it's his great grandfather. What was your great grandfather, Rabbi Posner's first name? Shalom. So I heard that when he used to come for Farbrengens or whatever it was. And when he'd get into the car going back to Pittsburgh, he would say, "No, ich fahr zum Reden." Right? Did you ever hear that? Okay, fine. I heard it from someone who knew him very well from Pittsburgh. So they asked him, obviously, what was Hayes? You were just in 7-7, you're going back to Pittsburgh. What's Hayes? First some Reden, you're going to the Rebbe. He says, well, he said, I think the way he said it was, where's the Rebbe really? His physical, presence in 770, is that where the Rebbe is, or it's where his Ratzon is, being fulfilled? And for me, that's in my Makom HaShluchos in Pittsburgh, so I'm Chvartzim Rebbe. And I recently had another read on it, which was, I used to go on the road more, now not so much, but as soon as I hit the road, all of a sudden I feel this, if I'm listening to jazz music on an average day when I'm driving to work on Long Island, I go past Jersey, or as I call it, as soon as you pass there's a part of central Jersey you pass and you can't get seltzer in the gas stations anymore. You're already entering, the Trump territory, and you could see it. First they go to flavored, bumblefuck. Yeah, you pass a certain point, maybe Patterson or I don't know, somewhere after there. And you could see first they go to flavored seltzer and the artificial stuff. Then there's ginger ale and no more seltzer. And that's it. And then and about that point, I start putting on Nuguni Esfados and Heichel Nigina and Maiserav. And it's like I just feel connected as soon as I leave. And so I'm putting that out there because I wonder if that's a sentiment that's shared. It sounds a little bit like it was. But before we get into that, and I have my own reflections on coming back, so to speak, to share about. I want to hear from Shmuly first. But let's do a niggin, yeah? And on the same theme of, there's certain nigunim that I just sometimes just come out of me. And this is one niggin that I remember not liking it a lot when I heard it in yeshiva or sang it. It's a popular niggin. And then one day I was in a good place a few years ago, and it just kind of came out of me, and I understood it completely. So the words Toshev Enosh adaka v'teimer shuvu b'nei adam, right? So God brings man to a point of kasis, crushed, and then he tells him return, shuvu b'nei adam, the son of man, whatever that means. But I remember when I first learned those words from Tehillim, I guess, it sounded very cruel, almost like there's a manipulation happening that God brings us, almost purposely puts us in a situation where we feel constrained, so that way we're going to need him and have to call out. And that sounded very cruel. And that a lot of things sounded very cruel. And then it was a very simple insight, but I was no, that's not really what it means. It's simply the reality is that, at least Bisman Agalos, the only way to want to call out is to be in a state of kasus. And we could fight City Hall or we can't fight City Hall, but that's how it is. And once I'm there, it doesn't really bother me to think, was it manipulation? Was it this? Was it that? It's it's almost, everything makes sense. Obviously, that's what, I wouldn't want it any other way.
So you're saying that there is a certain redemption that comes through the svire liba, through the broken heart, through the almost suffering. Or?
Yeah, and not from a place of like there's some manipulation here. Simply like, I put it this way without sounding too cheesy, but God is gifting us the opportunity of bringing us up to the breaking point without breaking altogether, so that we can like know what it means to desire connection for real. And I was gifted that.
Is it necessary? In other words, it is. Let's say, if we don't recognize it as like some people suppress, right? So we could see how certain ways of how people could just for survival, right? Whether in, we've seen Holocaust survivors do that, even some very successful ones. Somehow that becomes their almost inner force is expressing it, do you see expressing it, which seems sort of very in vogue these days, everyone being open, so to speak. Do you think that is necessary for the healing?
So we talked about this in the conversation that I had with Rabbi Jacobson and my friend Menachem Poznansky, which was we were lamenting the fact that here about the Tetzaveh, the Rebbe was talking about that we are entering a time when we should no longer need the crush, the cusses, in order to get in touch with identity. Right. So the Rebbe was challenging us and reminding us that we're entering a new phase, a new shlav of Jewish life, where we no longer need those kind of constraints in order to get in touch with that desire to connect and know who we are. But you asked, is expressing it necessary in order to find that? And I don't know if there's any basis for this. Maybe someone could shed some light. But I think that expressing, not from a place of desperation, but from a place of intention, is the antidote to that. So when with intention, not from a place of falling apart because they're coming to kill me, but simply because I desire to articulate, to express what it means, what it means to be a Jew, to be a Lubavitch, or whatever it is, to be a human being. Not pushing down or pushing away or sweeping under the rug, but expressing from a place of intention to build, not to run away from, and not to, and not to dump either. That is the healthy antidote, and that's what it means, that we can get in touch with that from a place of empowerment, not from a place of Pasha, we have no choice, and asatutve shreitman, but I'm by design choosing to express.
I think there's also, though, helpful to distinguish between, first of all, to define what it means, what it means kasus, what it means to be, because there's a big chiluk between pain and suffering. Pain is a reality of life. So could we reach it without pain? What do you mean, could you reach it without pain? Pain, this is part of our experience. Pain is not a bad thing. It's just pain.
You're saying that suffering is a self-inflicted wound?
Yes. You choose to suffer. And so I think maybe what the Rebbe was saying is enough of this thing where Jews are suffering, this whole suffering servant thing, it's not for us. It's to be able to take pain and be empowered by it, to say, it's not something I would choose, but now it's my best friend. It's something that makes me into a stronger person. The whole thing of suffering is where we say, why is this happening to me? Why does it have to be this way? We ask why about just a regular fact of life. And we also decide that pain, we've decided that pain is a bad thing. but it's not a bad thing. Nothing. It's not bad or good.
There's a
it's
difference.
just a thing. It's like saying, is this table bad or good? It's not bad or good. It's just a table. The pain is the same thing.
I think there's a simple way to distinguish the difference. I'm very happy you brought it because sometimes we use the two words interchangeably and they're world apart. That maybe there's a difference between a krechts and a kvetch. That a krechts is like
you want to imitate or tell us.
You have a
exactly right. What does it say in Hayamim that
Gimel Tammuz.
This Gimel Tammuz? What's the lashon?
That's when you hear the Shavela.
Because Shavela.
It's in the name of the Ragachover.
But you'll never hear Chabad condone or endorse kvetching, because the difference, I imagine, is one is like Chezzi was talking about, like lamenting the gratuitous, was it non-gratuitous? I keep getting myself, but like whatever. There's something that just comes with the territory of life, right? And maybe that's what, just to bring it back to the niggin, that Toshev Enosh at Dakar, like that's just part of the deal, whether we signed up for it or not. That's how it is by design. And we wouldn't want it any other way. Like think of the last like really boring person you like tried to get out of a conversation with, and they probably didn't have that. It's not by coincidence. Like we want things interesting and we want that pain, whether we are forthright about that or not. But suffering, on the other hand, right? The narrative that I attribute to the pain, that's a good way to differentiate. Suffering is the narrative that I attribute to the pain. So it's no longer, it's like, there we go again. Instead of a krechts, it's a kvetch. It's like, and yeah.
I mean, and even in Hebrew, the difference of tsar and yisurim. So usually tsar seems like there's a certain positive, from tsar agra, tsar gidul banim, like there's something more positive comes out of the tsar. Practically, we're like they say, no pain, no gain. Right. It makes us.
That was probably the most amount of dissecting of a niggin. I know.
Not even a niggin, man. We're just being discursive. We're just warming up, by the way.
I'm saying
and really, we're funnier, just so you know. we're just acting very.
There wasn't a single joke, by the way, said so far.
I know.
We didn't have one joke. No one said a joke.
Yeah.
You have something?
You're always holding. I don't know if I can say it over here.
No,
all right.
But no, you.
Farbrengen. All right.
Or the good Chalamite one you told me recently.
I told you a joke.
No, shame for
Das
us.
Was in Baruch verstehst du nicht diese Nazilus, was du verstehen. Let's say like all the Farbrengen, punchlines. Farbrengen. Okay.
Toshev Enosh Shuvu, Shuvu b'nei Adam, Toshev Enosh Adako, V'atay melech Shuvu b'nei Adam.
All right, Shmuly. So the question is, what Crown Heights means to me personally? Is that the question?
Crown Heights, and we spread it out to maybe it's the oil.
Okay, let's talk about the geographic location first. So if anyone's listening to this, Crown Heights, at least when I was growing up, it's basically an inner city. It's a little community in Brooklyn, and it's surrounded by Bedford-Stuyvesant. I think the geographical context is important. East New York, Brownsville, and at one point was a thriving Jewish community. In the mid-'60s, there was some violent crimes, and most of the establishment Jewish community moved away, and the Rebbe's foreign policy and local policy was the same. Jews don't back down. So he said, the Rebbe doubled down and said, everyone stay. And you can't blame the other communities for leaving. It was a dangerous place. And the only ones left, really, are the Chabad Lubavitch Chassidim. And in my family, at least, interesting that my parents lived in another neighborhood in New York, a safe neighborhood. And in the late 70s, they decided they're going, as everyone was moving away, they're going to move too. And we grew up on President, between Kingston and Albany.
Didn't your family live in Queens at some point?
Queens,
Right.
Gardens, yeah. And we were originally one of the only white families on the block. And Crown Heights was an inner city, middle class, for the most part, okay. But on my block, you couldn't, if you rode your bike, if you went towards Albany, you came back without the bike. It was that simple. So just to the context. And even if you drove to the Kingston side, I once came back without my bike, and my friends told me that it's better the alternative that the bike came back without you. So that was, you're lucky. So that was just a reality of Crown Heights. With that said, I think I'm a local creature. As a kid, I was one of those kids that always went to Gagnon Saw Montreal. And I remember coming back, when you're coming back from this beautiful mountains in Montreal, and then you see coming back to New York the smog in the distance. I remember thinking, this is my natural habitat. This is where I belong in the local. This is what the air we breathe. So that's sort of the context of Crown Heights. Then there's the locals. And I think historical context is also important because many of the locals are Holocaust survivors. They have either them personally or their parents, the trauma of Hitler. Most, I'd say this neighborhood is really a Russian enterprise dealing with trauma of Stalin. And a lot of the people in the neighborhood, just interesting just because what they went through. So there wasn't just where we lived. It was the only really safe passageway was to Chabad World Headquarters 770. So that was from my house to 770, which leads me to the Rebbe. So I spent a lot of time in 770 and in the shadows of the Rebbe. And there's no question that just being in the shadows of the Rebbe had had an indelible mark on me personally. And what's so unique about the Rebbe is that there are some people who are macro. You'll take someone like Mike Bloomberg, and he has his ideas about a new East River crossing or something, big ideas. And then you have some people who are local. They care about the widow, the orphan, and the Rebbe incorporated so basically macro and micro. And it's interesting. I was listening recently to a recording of a Lag BaOmer parade from 1950, I think 1957. The first time it was a big parade on the avenue. And Rabbi J.J. Hecht, of blessed memory, a really incredible chassid, and he's describing the Rebbe, and he just nailed it, in my opinion. He says, the man who I'm about to introduce to you represents everything noble in the eyes of God and in the eyes of man. And it really hits a chord, because as a kid we didn't understand the theology or the talks, but just watching the Rebbe and all his everything he did, you always knew that Oiseh Shalom for Shemoneh Esrei, the Rebbe's left foot first, Oiseh Shalom for Kaddish, the Rebbe's right foot, everything just so according to the book and so perfect at the same time. So living the spirit of the Torah, which is the perfect diet of truth and peace. When people get too truthful, it's too extreme. When people are too peaceful, sometimes what's lost is the boundaries. And it's really those two together. And Crown Heights, to me, is just, it's a personal thing. It's not necessarily a religious thing, is the Rebbe.
Yeah, I concur. And that especially Rabbi Shmuly, we grew up within a block of each other, and we were like within 2 minutes of 770, and if anything happened, it was like every Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv, every moment. And you're a few years younger, and I remember you as a kid always running. I think we also, not only did we stand together during Simchas Torah, and even the Rebbe's davenings when he would come out to the window in the back in 93, and maybe even during when the Rebbe davened for the Amud. I think it could have also, like, to the Rebbe's left, he was there, I think, right?
Yes, and I remember also during that period of time, after the Rebbe had suffered a stroke in 1992, sitting together at the hospital and learning sichos together.
Right.
We basically camped out there.
Yeah. So certainly. So what do you and how do you relate to Crown Heights now that after Gimel Tammuz?
Excellent question, because Chezzi mentioned it before, that about not falling into the trap of nostalgia, and I was thinking about how to distill the Rebbe in that period of time, and I think in 4 words: we want Mashiach now, and I think there's a we. There's Adas and Chasidim. There's a sense of unity and shared mission, which still is today. There's that there, and again, there's people. Everyone, it's a different spectrum, and it's more localized, which in certain ways, for where we are now, it's a blessing, because 770 is a Lubavitch World Headquarters is a big room. Now, today, there's a lot of these little class shows, and if you don't show up, they notice. There's a certain bigness can be a blessing, and then it was a blessing. Now bigness, I don't know if bigness right now is a blessing. I think these class shows is a really good development for where we are now. So there's the we, then there's the want. There's we're going somewhere. Everyone's there's this sense of we're headed to something, and Mashiach. And there's now a certain living in the present, and something's going on now. Whether the Rebbe is speaking about something, and it's there's a current and currency. Our Isay Lashon. It's current is the currency. That's what's going on right now, and I try very much to apply to not live in the past. And when I come to Crown Heights, I see the Bachurim and the people living now. So I see it's evolved clearly. not as a negative thing, because it's very Rebbe-esque to be now, and this is what's now.
You mentioned off the record earlier, based on the davening of Rosh Hashanah, of that there's Zechronius, Malchios, and Shofars. Do you want to explain it and give it over? And then I'll follow up with a question if you...
Okay, so it was said off the record, but since it's already on the record, okay. So Malchios is that people living with the sense that we're on the threshold of the coming of Mashiach. That's where we are in history. We are, in the context of Jewish history, we are at the time, based on all the holy books, that there's something epic's about to happen, and that's the Mashiach era as described in Maimonides. Okay, we're going to keep things theological, not sociological. So that's what it is. And then some people are Zechrenis. They and you can't blame them. They live in the past, and they that's where they are right now. And their default position for some people, they went out on shlichus in the 60s. Some went on shlichus, and people sort of as a default fall back into where they were in the presence of the Rebbe. And then I sort of said tongue-in-cheek that shofars is a shofar, that just people making noise, not necessarily on adding value. But again, it's a verb and not a noun. One person could be all three.
So how do we make them proper? In other words, how do we make zichronos, those fondness, almost like Chezzi mentioned earlier, nostalgia, almost. How do we make that? Like you say, you're not looking as much back, but obviously the way you're speaking, it's so part of you, and the current, the now, the erstwhile now is what it is, and what you grew up with and now is not present is probably very, very felt by extremely. Its absence is so present. No,
it's an excellent question. I'll answer with two statements, and then I sort of put them together. I joined maybe 3-4 years ago a WhatsApp group, a Farbrengen WhatsApp group. So we listen to one of the Rebbe's, at least one of the Rebbe's talks once a week, and then everyone sort of comments on the group. So that's a commitment of a few hours. So we're listening, we're percolating in a Farbrengen. And every Farbrengen, without exception, is an exception to the other Farbrengens. You have to listen to the Farbrengens. Those who listen to Farbrengens know what I'm talking about. Every Farbrengen is unique in its own way. And then when you listen to the Farbrengens and the Rebbe is talking about something specific in history, I'm reminded of something that we heard from Rabbi Baruch Lipsker, who was our mashpia. So there's one Farbrengen in 1980, summer of 1985, and the Rebbe is speaking about housing in Crown Heights. And the Rebbe, as mentioned before, that was worked on rebuilding Crown Heights and making it a place where people will move to. And the Rebbe was lamenting the fact that it's an inner city neighborhood and the housing is so expensive. It shouldn't be that way. So I asked Rabbi Lipsker, I said, who's the Rebbe talking about? Just curious, because it seemed the Rebbe was talking about a specific landlord. And the Rebbe, so Rabbi Lipsker says, all you need to know when you're listening to Farbrengen that the Rebbe is talking to you. So you're ruining the neighborhood. Very interesting. So he says, the Rebbe is talking about the neighborhood, you're ruining the neighborhood. And so you could laugh, but there's also anything that the Rebbe says can be applied, I think, at least this is a subjective question, so there's a Rorschach test to some degree, can be applied to our own life in whatever we're going through professionally or personally. That's my own take on it.
All right, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. And to close us out, here is Rudy Tepel from a record called the Lubavitch Wedding. I asked Baruch earlier if he remembered Benedict Stambler from that area of Crown Heights, and he's, together with his wife, produced a lot of Hasidic records, And amongst them was this record called Lubavitch Wedding. And Rudy Tepel, for those who may remember, I certainly don't, performed a lot of the Lubavitch weddings in the 60s and 70s and even the 80s. And you'll hear some of that familiar old sound that I felt was appropriate for some of the memories that Shmuly and Baruch were talking about. This is Nigun Rikud, also known as the Hakafa Nigun. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and please, as always, share some feedback, your thoughts. I really do enjoy them, and it's nice to know who's listening, and look forward to talking to you soon.